hold Joshua chapter 1, which you should have open, and Numbers chapter 32. And that's where we're going to be for the night. So Joshua now has everything that he needed. He's been commissioned, he's been encouraged, and equipped. Now the focus shifts some. We're shifting from this kind of prepping Joshua to action. So in just a few days, Israel is going to cross the Jordan finally. So this announcement went out throughout all the camp, and that's where our text picks up. Look at verse 10. It says, Joshua commanded the officers of the people, pass through the midst of the camp and command the people, prepare your provisions, for within 3 days you are to pass over this Jordan to go in to take possession of the land that the Lord your God is giving you to possess. This is big. 3 days, they're going to go. That's pretty wild. Verse 13. To the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh, Joshua said, remember the word that Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded you, saying, the Lord your God is providing you a place of rest and will give you this land. Your wives, your little ones, and your livestock shall remain in the land with Moses, that Moses gave you beyond the Jordan, but all the men of valor among you shall pass over armed before your brothers and shall help them, until the Lord gives rest to your brothers as he has to you, and they also take possession of the land that the Lord your God is giving them. Then you shall return to the land of your possession and shall possess it, the land that Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave you beyond the Jordan toward the sunrise. Okay, so really quick so that we have our boots on the ground and we're in the text. Which tribes does Joshua address in verse 12? Yes, Reuben, Gad, and half of the tribe of Manasseh. Joshua here, this looks really weird sitting in our text, but Joshua here is reminding these specific tribes, these 2.5 tribes, of a previous contract that they had already made. And that's going to be our text for tonight, because we don't know what's actually going on in this text. You have to go back in the story. So turn over to Numbers chapter 32. Numbers chapter 32. How wild was this story? It was, woo! I mean, did anyone else want to hide like under a blanket? I did. Okay, verse 1, check it out. Now the people of Reuben and the people of Gad had a very great number of livestock, and they saw, if you mark in your Bibles, mark that. That word is very important, and we're going to talk about it for a while. They saw the land of Jazer and the land of Gilead, and behold, the place was a place for livestock. Okay, who are the tribes involved? And you also had to look at verse 33. Yes. So it matches our text in Joshua chapter 1, right? This is the story that he is referring to. And it says they saw, right? Okay, I don't think this is in your homework, but let me give you the definition of this word. This is Strong's H 7200, 7200. The word is ra'ah, R something, ra'ah, I don't know how to spell it. Ra'ah, okay, it means, it's a very interesting word. It means to perceive, to consider, to engage in thought, or in other words, to observe and discern. So it's more than just like seeing something fly by in your peripheral vision, like, hey, I saw a bird. This is to engage your mind, like you're really thinking about it. So you're looking at something and you're trying to figure it out. It's when you engage your mind, and it's very, very important. This word is important, and we wanted to cross-reference this with another character that this sounds so familiar, doesn't it? To us. Somebody who saw the land and it was good for the sheep. Okay, so that is in Genesis chapter 13. Flip over to Genesis chapter 13. And I want you to compare Lot against the tribes and Abraham against Moses and see how many comparisons you guys can find. What is one thing that you guys saw that was the same? Only one, because I saw two, so just pick one. What they saw. Okay, that's really important. Lot lifted up his eyes and saw, right? The 2.5 tribes saw. Now, number 2 in verse 10, what did they see that was the same? Yes. Right, so it's fertile land. It's good for livestock, right? They both thought the same thing. Okay. Verse 11, I saw 2 in verse 11. Give me one of them. Yes, I heard it. Somebody said it. Chose for himself. Did you guys see that? Lot chose for himself Sodom and Gomorrah, and the 2.5 tribes chose for themselves this land, right? Okay, in verse 11, there was another key word that was the same. Eventually. Yes, I heard it. They separate. They're going to separate, right? So Lot and Abraham completely separate. The 2.5 tribes are split by the Jordan River, right? They're going to be separate from the rest. That's good. Okay, verse 12. Anything in verse 12? Yes. Okay. Lot settled in the land, right? So Lot settled in the land and the 2.5 tribes settled in the land. Okay, also in verse 12, anything that rung a bell with Abraham? Yes, Abraham is going to go on to the land of Canaan, which is the promised land, right? So the 9.5 and Joshua are going to head to the promised land, and Abraham heads to Canaan. That's really good. Verse 17, I think, is a bonus point. Did you guys look at verse 17? Arise and walk what? The land. Yeah, isn't that cool? So when Lot separated, the Lord reiterated to Abraham, arise, go walk the land. The land is yours, which is exactly what he said to Joshua. So you can see these like parallels, and it's super cool, you guys. So saw, very important. This word ra'ah got everyone in trouble. There is another Bible character who also had this problem. Her name was Eve. Genesis chapter 3 verse 6. Write it down. I'm going to read it to you. Genesis chapter 3 verse 6. It says, when the woman ra'ah, or saw, same word, that the tree was good for food, and that it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise, she took it and she ate it and she gave it to her husband. When the woman ra'ah the tree, same thing. 1 John chapter 2 says that for all that is in the world, the desires of the flesh, the desires of the eyes, and the pride of life is not from the Father, but it's from the world. and the world is passing away along with all its desires. But whoever does the will of God abides forever. For all that is in the world, the desires of the flesh, the desires of the eyes, the pride of life, it's all going to go away. But whoever does the will of the Lord abides forever. This word saw, this ra'ah, is something to study. If you want a word study in the word, that one's pretty interesting. Back to Numbers chapter 32. So it says that the land was good for livestock, right? So, verse 5, they said, if we found favor in your sight, let this land be given to your servants for a possession. Check it. Do not, oh man, I cannot read this. Dude, do not take us across the Jordan. What? Do not take us across the Jordan. You guys see this? Okay, this sentence is pivotal. It is the most important, and don't skip over it. It is what the Lord and the Lord through Moses holds on to, is this statement, this declaration that they make, do not take us across the Jordan. It's important because it tells us that the tribes initially, their heart posture was not to take one step farther. They're done. And that is the crux of the entire rest of the chapter. So hold on to that. This is absolutely crazy, you guys. Israel has been waiting for the promised land since it was promised to Abraham in Genesis chapter 12. They especially have been waiting for the promised land for the 400 years they were stuck in Egypt in slavery. This has been the dream of Israel, to become a nation and take the land from the beginning, from the birth of Abraham. So, but they don't. They stop right at the river's edge, these 2.5 tribes, and they say, we're good. We're good right here. They essentially say, no thank you to the abundant life. They say, do not take us across the Jordan. They saw and they settled. And indeed, if you go look this up, archaeology, and look up some Bible history on this land was as gorgeous as Sodom and Gomorrah, which it was. The Bible tells us that it looked like Eden. So was this Gilead. Gilead was this piece of land between 2 rivers. It was very fertile. There was all kind of nut trees and fruit trees, and it was a gorgeous land. It was beautiful land, no doubt about it, but it's not what God intended for them. That was not his best. They made a decision by sight, by what they saw. So did Lot. So did Eve. And sight is never faith, you guys. Faith is without sight. So they're making decisions on sight. So Moses steps in now to confront the heart of the matter, because every issue is an issue of the heart. Right? So look at verse 6. Check this out. Woo! This is rough, dude. I have this underlined and then I closed my eyes and tried to read it. But Moses said to the people of Gad and Reuben, shall your brothers go to the war while you sit here? Woo! I think about that. Just let that sit for a minute. Are you saying that you're going to send your brothers to war and you're just going to sit here? Moses is going to identify two deeper troubles, 2 deeper reasons that this is trouble. Now, just for context, in case you didn't get to your homework or the homework wasn't as clear as I prayed that it was, the tribes do not get reprimanded for settling outside of the promised land. It is a choice to go into the promised land. It holds true. It's not what the Lord told them to do. It's not their best, but they don't actually get in trouble for it. In fact, they get blessed for it later, which we'll talk about. So keep that in mind. But there's two things that the tribes got in trouble for. The first one is disengagement, and it comes from this verse. Shall your brothers go to the war while you sit here? The promised land, you guys, was a battlefield. It's not heaven. It's war. It's spiritual warfare. We've been talking about this the whole time. There's giants. There's fortified cities. There's chariots. There's all this going on. It is war. Their decision to settle outside of the land meant that the 9.5 tribes were left to conquer and hold the land without being at full strength. They are sending the 9.5 in to fight the battle while they're like, nah. They were disengaging from the prospect of going to war, to going on with the conquest. They said no. They said, we're good. We're tapping out. We've done enough. We're going to stay right here. That's what they were saying. So number one is disengagement out of being a soldier for conquest, for taking the tribes. Now, just so you guys know, and you can cross-reference this everywhere, the intention was that the 12 tribes all go into the promised land. They conquer, right? They do the whole conquest. And then at the end of the conquest, every tribe would be allotted out what the Lord would give them. And then they would settle back into those allotments and they would hold the ground. Right? That is what was intended. What the 2.5 tribes are saying is, actually, we just like our allotment now without the fight. We would like our land without engaging in the war. You just give us our inheritance now. We're not going to participate. That's what they're asking for. They're asking to be disengaged from the conquest of the land. They wanted their settlement, their allotment, before the battle. Which left the soldiers. Later it tells us that there's 44,000 armed men represented between the 2.5 tribes. 44,000 soldiers are opting out. That's a lot. Okay, so that's issue number one. Issue number one was disengagement. So question, the second thing that was concerning to Moses was what? Discouragement. This one's huge. This one gets a lot of ink. Look at verse 7. Second question. The first question Moses poses to them, which is a straight up reprimand, is, are you telling me that you want me to send your brothers to war without you? Right? The second thing is in verse 7. He says, why will you what? Discourage the heart of the people of Israel from going over into the land that the Lord has given them. Why are you discouraging everyone else from going over? By your heart attitude, by your posture. Look at verse 8. Your fathers did this. Your fathers did this to me already. Right? Your fathers did this when I sent them from Kadesh Barnea. Remember, that's a huge thing. We should have this memorized. Kadesh Barnea is where the 12 spies were sent from to go into the promised land the first time. So this Kadesh Barnea comes up a lot. Bible students, you should memorize this. Whenever you hear Kadesh Barnea, you should think 12 spies. Okay? So he says, I sent them from Kadesh Barnea to see the land. Check this out. Watch for repetition, you guys. I'm going to give you a big hint. I sent them from Kadesh Barnea to see the land. That's a hint. For when they went up to the valley of Eshcol, they saw the land. They discouraged the heart of the people from going into the land that the Lord had given them. And the Lord's anger was kindled on that day, and he swore, saying, surely none of the men who came out of Egypt from 20 years old and upward shall see the land that I swore to give them to Abraham, to Isaac, to Jacob, because they have, mark it, they have not wholly followed the Lord. Do you see that? This is important. They shall see the land. Where am I? Surely none of them shall come up upward. They shall see, there's another one, I skipped it, the land that I swore to give them, because they have not wholly followed me. Talking about the 10 spies. Did not wholly follow the Lord, or in other words, had a divided heart. They were for the Lord, but not all the way. They were half in, half baked, half dedicated, half committed. They were not wholly following the Lord. None except Caleb and Joshua, for they, what? They did wholly follow the Lord. This is important. They did wholly follow the Lord, or in other words, their heart was not divided. They were fully committed. They were fully in with the Lord. The two. This stance, this heart posture of the 2.5 tribes is discouraging the people. Now listen, in Numbers chapter 14 at Kadesh Barnea, when the 10 spies came back, check this math. The fear of 10 men thwarted the faith of an entire multitude of people. 10 men put all of Israel on a death march. 10. Moses is saying, here we go again. It's like deja vu. But it's not 10 this time, you guys. It's the strength of 2.5 complete tribes of people. Imagine the strength of that discouragement. If 10 people could turn 3 million into a death march, what would 2.5 tribes do? Right? So let's, verse 12 again, one more time. Caleb and Joshua had a distinction, and it's very important. It distinguished them from the other 10. There's only one thing that the Lord says, this is what's different. The difference with them is what? They wholly followed the Lord, undivided, all the way in, fully committed. Nothing and no one could sway them. So here's the math on the spies versus Joshua and Caleb. The difference for someone who would risk for the abundant life is an issue of the heart. It's the difference between someone who's wholly committed and someone who's sort of committed. The 2.5 tribes were sort of committed. That's why he's bringing it up. Now, look at verse 13. The Lord's anger was kindled against Israel. He's still giving them a history lesson. And he made them wander in the wilderness. How long? 40 years they wandered in the wilderness until all the generation that had done evil in the sight of the Lord was gone. Okay, now he's going to talk directly to the tribes. Check it. It's huge. Verse 14. And behold, you have risen in your father's place a brood of sinful men, to increase still more the fierce anger of the Lord against Israel. Do you see how important this discouragement is? It's huge. Look at verse 15. This kills me. Verse 15. If you turn away from following him, he will again abandon them in the wilderness, and you will destroy them. Who's the you? The tribes. Listen, if you turn the ship around, if your discouragement turns them back into the wilderness again, it is on you. That's your fault. This is very blunt. This is very prickly, you guys. This is a prickly lesson. Okay, so Israel is ready to take the land. They're right there. They can see the river. They're standing there. The concern was that the heart attitude, this heart issue of the 2.5 tribes would discourage everyone else, just as what happened before with the 10. Again, by way of reminder, the statement in verse 5, that last sentence, is pivotal to what's going on. Why are they getting reprimanded so hard right now? The end of verse 5 tells you why. Do not take us across the Jordan. That was a statement. So after this strong reprimand from the Lord through Moses, the tribes then, they think about it. They probably have a powwow, some sort of a meeting, order in Chipotle. They talk about it. They come back to Moses with a counteroffer, and that's where the rest of the chapter goes. So there's a counteroffer to their first statement of, we are not going. We do not care. We're not going. Moses is like, I'm sorry, what? Are you going to disengage and discourage everybody else from going into the promised land? I think not. So they come back with a counter offer. Check verse 16. They came near to him and said, we're going to build our sheepfolds. We're going to build our cities. But, verse 17, we will take up arms, ready to go before the people of Israel until we have brought them to their place. And our little ones shall live in the fortified cities because of the inhabitants of the land. We will not return to our homes, that is, across the river where they wanted their land. We won't go home until each of the people of Israel has gained his inheritance. Right? For we will not inherit with them on the other side of the Jordan. We won't take land on the promised land side or on the other side of the Jordan. We won't take that land because our inheritance has come to us on this side of the Jordan to the east. So that's their counteroffer. Their counteroffer is what? Their counteroffer is directly addressing these two huge issues that were really the issue. The issue was disengagement and discouragement. They're like, okay, we're going to do that head on, and we're going to go to war. If we go to war, if we fight alongside our brothers, that keeps the army intact. And it should help to encourage the people to keep going because they're not losing their army. They're not losing the strength of the soldiers. So that's their counter offer. Does that make sense? Okay, look at verse 20. It says, so Moses said to them, check this out. Don't read this too fast. This is important. If you will do this, pause. If you will do what? What did they just agree to? Going to war, right? Still going to war like they would have. If you will do this, if you will take up arms to go before the Lord for the war, and every armed man of you will pass over the Jordan before the Lord until he has driven out his enemies from before him, and the land is subdued before the Lord, Then after that you shall return and be free of obligation to the Lord and to Israel, and this land shall be your possession before the Lord. Moses says, okay, that's fine. Because remember, the issue was not that they wanted to settle necessarily. It's a bummer. It's not what the Lord wanted. But the big issue was discouraging and disengaging so that the rest of the tribes won't go either. Right? That's the big problem, is that you're going to turn this whole thing around again. So they come up with this thing, and Moses is like, okay, that's fine. The agreement's fine. As long as you hold to it that you will fight with us to the very end, then you can have this land. Verse 23, huge. Check it out. But if you will not do so, behold, you have sinned against the Lord, and be sure your sin will find you out. Okay, we've all heard this verse, right? Or we've quoted it. We know about it. Did you guys know the context? This is the context of this verse, which is kind of different, I think, than how we hear this verse. But this is the context. Okay, let's keep going. Verse 24. Build cities for your kids. Build folds for your sheep. Do what you have promised. People of Gad and the people of Reuben said, okay, and they agree, right? All this is kind of reiterating. And then he makes them accountable by telling the rest of the tribes what the agreement is. So that's kind of the rest of it. If you will not do this, behold, your sin will find you out. Usually when we hear that verse, we think of murder, adultery, embezzlement, the top 10 list. Things done in the dark, in the secret. And indeed, that's true. It is true. Consequences will catch up with you. Make no mistake. But the stunning thing is that none of those apply here. That's not the sin that would find them out. This sin is much more subtle and much more dangerous. The sin that is talked about here is crucial, and I think it's a huge reminder for us, because the sin being referred to is the sin of disengagement and discouragement to everybody else. The sin of doing nothing. That is not usually the sin that we put with this verse. It's much more sneaky and much more subtle, and probably hits closer to home for us. A broken commitment, not showing up, not following through on the commitment to fight with Israel would be a grave sin for these 2.5 tribes. That's the sin that they're talking about. Now, I'm going to read you this Spurgeon quote because I think it's amazing. I love Spurgeon, by the way. Huge fan. This is what he said. Depend upon it. If you are not serving the Lord our God, we are committing the sin of discouraging our fellow men. They are more likely to imitate our lethargy than our energy. The sin of doing nothing is about the biggest of all sins, for it involves almost everyone else. It's true. Huge. Now, I wanted us to look at a couple verses that apply to this idea, and I hope that this is where we can be both encouraged and exhorted, because this room is a room of seasoned saints. So listen up. We're about to get schooled and hopefully light a fire under us. So Ephesians chapter 5, switch over to there. Let's look at these verses that we had in your homework. Let's slow down and look at them because they're awesome. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 15. The first word, you already have to stop. In the ESV, the first word is, in verse 15, is what? Look. It means discern. It's almost kind of the word like ra'ah. It means to observe, to think about, to perceive, all of that. It says discern carefully. Then, what's the next word? How you walk. This is so important, you guys. He says, listen up. Now remember, we talked about how Ephesians chapter 1 through 3 was who we are in Christ. Chapter 4 through 6 is what we do for Christ. So this is chapter 5. So you're in the exhortation bullet points. Okay? So these are things that you do because of who you are in Christ. Get to work. Do these things. He says, discern carefully then how you walk. That word is so huge. Not if you walk or when you walk. If you're following Jesus, technically you're walking with Jesus. Paul's exhortation is discern carefully how you are walking. The value, the quality of your walk, how you are being an ambassador for Christ, all those things, how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the what? Best use of your time, because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but check it. This is going to be a theme for all three of these passages. Understand what the will of the Lord is. There's three things that's kind of corny, but this is how I remember this passage. It is intentional, it is perceptive, and it is discerning. Look then how you walk is intentional. You're walking with intention. Making the most use of your days because of your time, because your days are evil, means that you're perceptive of what's going on around you and you're seizing every opportunity for Jesus. And to understand what the will of the Lord is to be discerning about what the Lord wants for you. Intentional, perceptive, discerning. And what we want for us is God's perfect will, not his permissive will. What the 2.5 tribes got was the Lord's permissive will. It was not his best. It was permitted, but it was not his best. And we see through history that that decision to be separated from the tribe. Remember Amalek and Joshua? We talked about this when we were in the leader homework. He was fighting in the valley and Moses was up with his staff, remember? And the enemy was Amalek, the dwellers in the valley. Remember that? And how we turned to Deuteronomy to figure out why it is that they are fighting them. And it said that Amalek was picking off the weak and the weary, the stragglers in the back, right? The easy pick, the easy prey. What the 2.5 tribes did was basically put them in easy prey territory. They are separated from the tribes, which means they're not accountable to the tribes. They're not being protected by the tribes. When you're in tight like you should, you can watch each other's six for the enemy. You can watch each other's family. You can pray for each other. You have accountability. There's something about sheep being flocked. That's a thing. You're supposed to flock together. And what do? They're like, nah. And they put themselves way over here. Not only that, they are forever away from Shiloh, which is where the tabernacle was. So all the yearly feasts and all the things, all the tithing and all the offerings they were supposed to bring in, they eventually stopped doing that. Eventually, they fell hard into idolatry, which we know all the tribes did. And we know that the 10 tribes were all taken off the land to Assyria. But Chronicles tells us that the 2.5 tribes were first. Why? Because they're away from the pack. They're early pick. They're easy to take off. So there's consequences. So though this was permitted by the Lord, it wasn't his best. It wasn't what he intended, but it was permitted. We have free will. The 2.5 tribes knew exactly what the Lord wanted for them, and they opted out. They're still in the family. They're still kingdom. But they picked something less than God's best. Ephesians tells us, look then carefully how you walk, making the best use of the time because the days are evil. And understand what the will of the Lord is. Lord, I want your best. I don't want what you're permitting me to have. I want what you wanted for me that was perfect. Right? Anybody? Anybody want God's perfect will, not what he's letting us do? Because we're dumb. We're sheep. We look at something and we're like, oh, that looks good. No, it's not. It rarely is. Okay, turn to Hebrews chapter 6. Hebrews chapter 6. Here's another one. Oh, this one's so good. I have short-term memory loss, so every time I come to a verse, I was like, oh man, I love this verse, which is why all of them are my favorite. Okay, verse 11. And we desire each one of you, listen to this, pretend like they're talking to you because they are. We desire each one of you to show the same earnestness, which means diligence or haste. It's one of those action words. Remember we talked about straining and pressing? It's one of those. This earnestness is diligence and haste to have the full assurance of hope until the end. We desire that each of you show the same diligence, haste, earnestness to have the full assurance of hope until the end. Until when? The end? So not like on the last lap? Or bench yourself a mile before the marathon is over? Or set up a lawn chair too early? Nah. He says hope all the way to the end. Run all the way through. All the way. Okay, hope all the way to the end. So that you may not be what? Sluggish, lazy is the word. Lazy. So that you would not be sluggish, but what? Imitators, which is the Greek word for mime. To mime somebody or be a role model. Imitators of those who through faith, big word, right? The currency of heaven, and patience. This word means consistency and steadfastness. Consistency. I love that word. Inherit his promises. Let's put it all together. We desire that each one of you show the same diligence and haste and earnestness to have the full assurance of hope until the very end of the race, so that you may not be lazy, but imitators and imitators of those who through faith and consistency inherit the promises. Here's what I love about this. We need to find somebody that we can imitate or mime who's running the race all the way through as hard as they can. The Lord says to the 2.5 tribes, do not discourage them. And as Spurgeon says, they are more likely to imitate your lethargy than your energy. If everybody's pulling up a lawn chair and getting their iced tea before they cross the promised land, then all the runners who are running behind them are like, I guess I'll get my lawn chair. I guess I'll tap out too. I mean, if this, y'all, seasoned saints, If the seasoned saints all tap out and get their iced tea, then the young ones in the faith that are coming up behind us, they are going to pull up a lawn chair too, which is what Moses is saying to them. Don't you dare do that. The tribes are going to tap out if you do. It is human nature. We need to find somebody who we can chase, like imitate, follow. Follow me as I follow Christ, Paul says. But more to that, for this room, we need to be the ones that people will imitate. Man, this was so big for me. Like, run with the horses kept going through my mind. You cannot stop. There are people who are counting on you and looking up to you and will follow your energy or follow your pace. Be pace setters for the kingdom. The Lord's like, man, there's an accountability and responsibility because people are watching seasoned saints to see if they will endure with consistency all the way to the end. Never to be lazy, but to be pace setters, living a life of faith that's worth imitating to the best that we can. Okay, Hebrews chapter 10. Check this one out. Verse 35. For you have need of... Are you guys there? Verse 35. Lie. Verse 36. For you have need of... Which is the same word. It's consistency and steadfastness. So that... What's the word? When you have done the will of God, you may receive what is promised. See the will of God again? The will of God, the best that He has for you. You will receive what is promised for yet a little while, and the coming one will come and will not delay. Yes. But my righteous one shall live by... What is it? Faith. And if he shrinks back, my soul has no pleasure in him. Check this out. But we are not those who shrink back. We are not going to be like the 2.5 tribes. No, we are not those who shrink back or destroyed, but of those who have faith and preserve their souls. Faith is a guard to keep our souls safe. If you're running with endurance, with consistency, hoping to be good ambassadors and imitators of Christ, it guards your soul from being distracted from all the cares of the world, you see. He says, listen, don't be those who are shrink back and are destroyed like the 2.5 tribes. Go like the 9.5. Go all the way in. Do what the Lord has that's best for you. You see a theme? The Lord's perfect will for us is the abundant life, not a life of this is far enough. Be wholehearted. That's the exhortation. Be a Joshua for others. Walk in a manner that's worthy of your calling, an example that's worth imitating. Seasoned saints, I know it's rough out there and we're tired, but keep pressing on. Pursue the Lord's fullness with everything you have. Be wholehearted. Blaze a trail that invites others to run with endurance just like you, farther and closer to Christ. Because people are watching us. Be the 9.5. Cross the Jordan. Encourage others to come with you. Brand your sword. Stay in the war. Run with the horses. Set a pace. Set a pace that draws others forward into the promises of the Lord. Be an encourager to cross the Jordan, not a discourager to pull up a lawn chair. Do not disengage. We are at war. Here's one thing that was really impressed on my heart. War is not an option. Being a soldier is not an option. You don't opt out of it. You are on the battlefield whether you like it or not. And the 2.5 tribes found that out. Opting out was not a thing. So they're going to be in the battle anyway, but it's half-hearted. And it's not the Lord's best. If we're going to be fighting in the battle anyway, let's fight with everything we've got. Be wholehearted, you see. It was the difference between the 10 and the 2. An issue of the heart. It always is.